What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, June 13th, 2016, getting about halfway through the month of June here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Obviously, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And boy, oh boy, do I hate being right all the time, because last week on this show, I made a prediction there was going to be some kind of a spectacular event so the media would have an excuse not to cover Donald Trump's speech about the crimes of the Clintons. And boy, did we get that on Saturday night. And this is obviously what we're talking about, the shooting at the Pulse nightclub down in Orlando, Florida, just a few days after that singer got shot, rough town Orlando. And this one just reeks of political machination, because in one event they're able to exploit ISIS and the gays and assault rifles. They're hitting all the hot buttons out there. How very, very convenient. And we've already got Obama, Hillary, and Kerry hopping on that Al-Qaeda ISIS train to that nightclub. Everybody's just pounding this for whatever their agenda is. And they're actually conflicting with each other, because you have Hillary Clinton is out there saying she's pro-gay and pro-immigration. Obviously, the two don't get together. And a big part of that problem has to do with this fantasy that the liberals had, that they could take two cultures and blend them together, and hundreds of years of religion and cultural identity would simply disappear overnight. Did not happen. And, of course, everybody's out there saying it's a lack of gun control, blah, blah, blah. Actually, there was gun control. That nightclub is a gun-free zone. There were no guns there other than in the hands of the shooters. And, of course, originally, on the very first day, they were saying that this guy just hated gays. And he was very offended because he'd seen two men doing sloppy kisses right in front of his 3-year-old son. But today, it's ISIS. You've got to hate ISIS. I know how to stop ISIS. Just put a stop payment on all those checks from the State Department and the CIA. That'll shut them down. So they're out there just pounding this as hard as they can. We're all supposed to hate ISIS. Where did ISIS come from? Well, from all these U.S. interventions in the Middle East. This is the backlash. And it's absolutely absurd. Now, the reality is we're already seeing indications that this was a false flag attack. All day yesterday and all day today, Fox News has not covered anything except this. This is saturation propaganda. They're going to shove it down our throats. And they were out there, Martin Omar was the crazed lone nut assassin who was also on prescription psychiatric medicine. And he went and he did this all by himself. And then immediately we start getting reports that there were multiple shooters at the scene. There were people holding the doors closed so the people inside the club could not get out. And there was one TV interview of the witness who was saying somebody was blocking the door so we couldn't get out, and all of a sudden they cut away from him. Oh, we were not supposed to say that. So they're already trying to cover that up. Now, apparently, a witness at the club was saying he heard the shooter on his cell phone saying there were 4 others involved, 3 snipers, suggesting they're outside or up high somewhere, and a woman suicide bomber. Remember, there was an explosion reported, and the police came out and said, it was something we did, nothing to see here, move along, move along, move along. And we're seeing all of these posts on social media reporting 3 shooters, 2 shooters, hearing gunfire from different parts of the room. So there were multiple shooters there. Now, here's the point. Everyone is out there examining why Omar Mateen did this. Well, if he is one of a group, it is foolish to presume he is the leader. They may have just taken him along. Remember the Gleiwitz incident. Now, when Adolf Hitler wanted to justify the invasion of Poland, he had his own people attack the radio station, and they took along a Polish man and shot him dead so the body could be found. And what do we have here down in Orlando? A massive atrocity and a convenient dead body of a targeted group. This is an exact replay of what's going on. Now, here in the U.S., at least up until recently, the American corporate media was Orwellizing all mentions of multiple shooters and the doors being held closed. But the foreign press isn't going along with it. It's still out there. On the corporate media in Europe and Great Britain, where they're talking about how there were multiple shooters. And apparently, this is starting to feel like this was kind of cowboyed. It was a rush job. They've made more mistakes on this one than they did even on the Boston bombing. And now, as of an hour ago, the FBI is out there hemming and hawing and saying, well, there may have been other participants. And again, if you've got multiple participants, then Mateen Omar may not have been the leader. And so you can't make presumptions about what the motive was, other than to create a media distraction and get everybody riled up about gays and immigration and provide more fodder for the campaign. And again, a media distraction away from Trump's speech about the Clinton crimes. Now, we're going to welcome our on-air affiliates back to the broadcast. We're talking about the terrible shooting in Orlando that happened over the weekend, how conveniently timed to distract the media away from Donald Trump's speech on the crimes of the Clintons. And already there are indications this is another in a long chain of false flag attacks. Now, first of all, as he was originally described yesterday, this Mateen Omar did not fit the pattern of somebody willing to throw his life away in an event like this. 3-year-old son, family man, got a nice home, nice job. This guy was a registered Democrat. He's a U.S. citizen. His parents are from Afghanistan. They're very rich. They got family money. This guy just doesn't fit the pattern of somebody willing to do something like this. Now, originally they were talking about this homophobic angle, that we got to sell ISIS. And then the FBI said, well, we can't find any evidence that he had anything to do with ISIS. And then all of a sudden, this story pops up where Omar Mateen called 911 to pledge allegiance to ISIS before the attack. Or somebody pretending to be Omar Mateen. Now, according to Mateen's father, this attack had nothing to do with religion. He was incensed about the open gay culture. And that's why it is silly for politicians in this country to claim to be pro-gay and pro-immigration, knowing the two are not going to mix and we're going to have violence in the streets. That's if you believe the official story. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Mateen Omar worked in security for a company called G4S. This is a global security company. Roots in Israel. U.S. government's a big customer of them, and they do the dirty jobs nobody else wants to do. In fact, Judicial Watch outed G4S as smuggling illegal immigrants from the Mexican border deep into the interior of the United States of America, and then just letting them go. They were part of this whole situation. Maybe Mateen Omar was told by his superiors at G4S, we need you to come with us down to this gay club and stage an event, because they needed a convenient dead body, just like Hitler needed a convenient dead body at Gleiwitz. But right now, at least here on the internet and the independent media, everybody is presuming this to be a false flag simply because there have been so many of them. Now, Mateen had a legal firearm license from the state of Florida because he worked in security. He'd been a former bail bondsman. This guy is as middle-class mainstream America as you can get. We'll blame the guns, we'll blame the guns, we'll blame the guns. Nobody but the bad guys had guns at the club. It was a gun-free zone. Now, most of the witnesses from the club are still being withheld from the media. There's one exception, Louis Burbano, who's been all over the media telling the official story about what we're supposed to believe. A search of the Internet Movie Database confirms this guy is a professional actor. He's an actor, and he's out there doing what he does best, and the corporate media is holding him up saying, see the official story. Now, Sadiq Mateen, this guy's father, came to the United States from Afghanistan, He's very well off. He's started many companies. You look in the Florida state records, he's started many corporations. And according to some reports, he visited the State Department on several occasions. Now, the State Department is now denying that he was ever there, saying they have no records of meeting the Orlando shooter's father. Probably those records were stored on Hillary's private email server or something like that. But here's where it gets really interesting. Story breaking on INFOWARS. Hillary Clinton's State Department stopped an investigation into the Orlando killer's mosque on the excuse that it singled out Muslims. And apparently both the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security were investigating this mosque as early as 2011 for ties to terrorism. But the investigation was shut down under pressure from Hillary Clinton's State Department. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mo in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, thanks for taking my call. Just, you know what they say, that's 3 degrees of separation, whatever. This mosque, if you drive out of my neighborhood and go about 7 blocks, there's the mosque right there. I pass it every day going back and forth out of my neighborhood. So that's no kidding. But anyways, my question is, you know, Quay Bono or look for what should be there and isn't. I mean, doesn't this helps? I think this put Trump in the White House. I think this just, if they don't kill him. So why did they want to hurt Hillary? This helps Trump, to me.
I think this was a rush job. They're trying to help Hillary with a media-worthy distraction because of Trump's coming speech on the Clinton crimes, and the situation in California is deteriorating. They're uncovering more and more evidence of massive election fraud in California. The best estimates are Bernie Sanders should have won in a landslide, 69% to 31%. And there's already a lawsuit out there. They're digging that out. So Hillary needed a distraction, needed something to support her anti-gun agenda, needed to support her agenda, attract the gays back to supporting Hillary Clinton. And but again, this pro-gay agenda has collided head-on with the pro-immigration agenda. And I think the help that it's going to provide to Trump's campaign is inadvertent, that they thought it was going to do more good for Hillary than for Donald Trump, but I don't think so. I don't think they thought this one all the way through. This was a rush job.
Well, if you go by comments I'm seeing and just what I felt, just initial knee-jerk is, since it's right at home here, I mean, that just freaked me out. But, I mean, I think this helps Trump more than anything, because the comment, even gay people want to be protected. They want the strong man. And Trump comes off as the strong man.
Yes, really does. He does. I mean, you know, in fact, now that we're finding out, and by the way, that one mosque isn't the only time Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, blocked investigations into various Muslim organizations.
Right.
You know, she needed them as assets to play these little games here.
Well, I think Trump's going to be doing the swearing in unless they kill him or something. I can't figure this one out, and maybe some more evidence will come. Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Love the show.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch to John in Barbados. John, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I think I have the inside track onto the leader of that quintet who attacked the club in Florida. And he goes by the name of James Comey Jr.
That's an interesting claim. What do you have to back that up?
Lots of things. One of the things I was investigating this morning is the tie between the State Department and this guy. And 3 times or 4 times did the FBI supposedly interview this guy. I mean, he looks like he's been persuaded to do this by the FBI as a patsy.
That's one explanation if he acted alone, because we know he was on prescription psychiatric medication, and people who are on those things can be talked into doing absolute absurd nonsense. But if there are, in fact, multiple shooters, then it's, I think, a lot closer to the Glywoods incident where they took Omar along and basically so that they could have a dead Muslim body there to say, see, everything's in a nice, neat package, a lot of dead people, dead Muslim, linked to ISIS, blame the guns, and everybody's off and running.
Well, I think I agree with the previous caller. This is going to strengthen Donald Trump's case.
I think it will. I don't think that was the intention. I think this was done to help Hillary Clinton. Because let's be very honest here. Donald Trump doesn't have the resources to pull something like this off. This requires somebody who's inside the government, who's able to control the police, who's able to control the media. Trump doesn't have that. Obama does.
Well, to me, I made a statement on Skype this morning. This was a distraction, a false flag to take people away from today's speech by Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was intended to actually diminish Donald Trump. Unfortunately, this connection between the State Department when Hillary Clinton was there and the, if you like, the blocking of the investigation of this particular mosque actually sort of turns it on its head, and it now looks like this is another democratic, if you like, dirty trick. And I think the FBI is involved, and the guy himself, the dead guy, was a Democrat. So we're looking at lots of people with converging agendas wanting this to happen.
Well, yeah, and again, we're seeing everybody kind of rip it apart to serve their agendas, and the story is changing so fast. I didn't even have time to flip over that little egg timer on this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, on Skype and on YouTube channels and various things, they're putting all this nonsense out. But it's clear nobody believes the narrative that the government is pushing. Nobody at all.
No, nobody is. I mean, the government has a major credibility problem. They've created it for themselves. I've got no sympathy for them. And again, the online shills are working overtime, trying to load up all the corporate media comment sections with comments to support the official story. But I think the clash between these two agendas, the pro-immigration and pro-gay agenda, has seriously weakened whatever impact they thought this was going to have. And they're still pushing the gun grabber situation. Well, if that hadn't been a gun-free zone, if these shooters had gone into that club knowing there were people in there who could probably fire back, they might have decided not to go in at all. They might have called it off. All of these attacks always take place in these gun-free zones, these giant government-supplied open-air shooting galleries full of helpless, disarmed victims.
The other thing that strikes me is that this guy, the dead guy, came from, as you said, a rich Afghan family who'd been in America. And he was actually born in New York.
He was born in New York, yes.
Yes, I mean, he was educated in the American system. He is, for all intents and purposes, an American Muslim. So, this whole thing stinks to high heaven.
It absolutely does, no question about that. Anyway, listen, John, I'm going to let you go. The phone lines are really loading up on this one. We're going to switch to Roseanne in North Carolina. I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind? Roseanne, are you there?
If you had heard, are you there?
Yes, you're on the air.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I was just, hi Mike. I was just wondering if you had heard that the Phoenix chapter of the LGBT had endorsed Donald Trump over this.
That actually turned out to be a hoax, unfortunately.
Oh, did it?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All right, we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. This guy is actually, for all intents and purposes, working for DHS because it's pretty, does contract work with federal government security contract work, and that's armed security. So the guy obviously had a federal, he actually had a federal background check and all that.
Yes.
And that's usually very intense because, when I used to be a correctional officer down in Texas, and I tried to get a job with Cantex, which was a contracted security thing for a place for the...
Okay, Mark, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Mark, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Don't go away. I want to hear the rest of the story, but we're going to have to listen to it after we come back from these few commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to Mark in North Carolina. Mark, you were talking about how you were a correctional officer and the process by which you would have to get your permit for the firearm was rather rigorous.
No, that's not what I was a Texas State Correctional Officer, okay?
Yes.
And there were a couple of contracted federal jobs available at Pantex, which assembles and disassembles nuclear weapons, and also at Bell Helicopter, security for Bell Helicopter. Both you would have to get a federal security check for. You would have to get a federal security check for. And I applied to those places because I got sick and tired of working in that prison.
Yes,
okay?
I can imagine.
And they both told me, through pre-interview, they said, well, what's your credit like? It's not good because I've just gone through a bankruptcy because of the divorce, and, so my credit was really shot. But they said, we like your qualifications and all that, but don't even bother because that's one of the first things they're going to look at. So what I'm saying is
only rich people are going to be trusted with guns here, like Omar Mateen, who came from a wealthy family, and he had, a Florida State firearms license and all these other certifications to be working in security.
But they say that they were checking this guy out for years, that he was on their list, that he was on the FBI, what do you call it again, watch list and all that, and yet he was working for all intents and purposes as a DHS employee, as a DHS security employee, where he had to have a top-notch security clearance. Yeah,
see, let me tell you what's going on. When it first happened, and early yesterday, the story was there were no indicators whatsoever. He was not on a terror watch list. And that supports the idea that he was set up as a patsy. Today, of course, they're selling ISIS. Oh, yes, we knew he was there. He was out there. And everybody saw the warning signs, but, they didn't want to report him because he's a Muslim, and everybody's got to be politically correct, and you don't single Muslims out and everything. And they're thrashing around trying to glue this story back together. Because if this guy was on the FBI's radar and they did interview him 3 times, then clearly the FBI has utterly failed. And what it really what it comes down to, let me summarize this just a little tiny bit. Okay, we have got one of 2 situations going on. Okay, either these terrorist attacks are all government-sanctioned frauds, in which case the government ought to be fired, or these terrorist attacks are real, in which case nothing this government has done over the last quarter of a century actually works, and we should fire the government anyway. There is no way to interpret this event, that we should allow this government to continue to manage this country.
There's only one thing, though, Mike. If this is a false flag, okay, and I'm beginning to believe, again, it very well may have been, and wanting to, hurt Trump and help Hillary, why wouldn't, you would think they would have gotten themselves a Timothy McVeigh type of guy and set him up instead.
Oh.
Because, that would have been, that would have been a liberal to left extreme, a right-wing fanatic, right-wing, I don't know, either religious fanatic or not even religious fanatic.
Well, like I said earlier in the show, I think this was cowboyed. I think it was a rush job because, Hillary needed something to keep Donald Trump's speech about the Clinton crimes off the TV, and this is it. And like all rush jobs, it was just thrown together, slapdash. They didn't think it all the way through. And Hillary gets to get on her anti-gun, pro-gay bandwagon, and I don't think we're going to hear anything about her too much from the pro-immigration. But it feels to me like this was a rush job, and it was very, very badly put together.
Yeah, but, I can't see. First of all, Trump he's going to talk about those to Clinton and Cash anyway. He's going to just wait a few days. It's not that he's going to keep it silent.
No, and we're going to carry it here on the independent media anyway. We're absolutely out there going to report on all this stuff. All of the information I've collected over the last 22 years about the Clintons, all of a sudden it's current events once again. Okay, listen, Mark, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got other callers waiting. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Alex in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there?
Good. Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
I hear you. What's on your mind today?
Not much. I hate saying it's nice and convenient to have this kind of stuff take place when Hillary Clinton has lawsuits going against her for massive vote fraud all over the country.
Yeah, not only that, of course, again, Donald Trump is making all of the Clinton crimes from the last 20 years current events, and everybody's talking about them. Because once you understand the degree to which government and corporate media lies to you, you go back and you look at all of those deaths and all of the crimes and corruption and realize, yeah, it's been ongoing and nonstop, and it is just absolutely amazing what they've gotten away with.
That's right. And what's amazing to me is if when I go to the doctor and I need an antibiotic prescribed to me, they do a background search to make sure I'm not allergic to penicillin, for example. We can't do that with sickos that are on psychiatric drugs to make sure they don't get
again, the problem we have right now is, you know, we've seen the story about Omar change so much to support the agendas. I don't think we should take anything that we're being told about him at face value. I mean, looking again at the indications of his home and, you know, that he spent his entire life in the United States. He had a 3-year-old son. It just doesn't fit with this idea of somebody who walked into this club and started shooting at people knowing that he was probably going to die. You know, and
I know, and it's always an Afghani or an Iranian, or it's always a freaking ISIS member. It's just incredible.
Well, again, you know, yesterday they were saying there was absolutely no evidence this guy was connected to ISIS, and then immediately they came out with this story that he'd called 911 from inside the club, or somebody pretending to be him called 911 from inside the club to pledge allegiance to ISIS and mention about how we did the Boston bombing and blah, 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 trying to cover all the bases here.
Yeah, it's just like 9/11. They knew all the freaking terrorists within 20 minutes, and they were on a TV screen. It's incredible.
It really is. I mean, the thing is a theater production. Did you see, you know, when they had the surgeon come on out, you know, dressed in his surgical gown? Those things are supposed to be sterile. You don't walk outside the hospital wearing one, and there wasn't a speck of blood on it at all. Remember, look for what should be there and isn't. This guy put this surgical outfit on as a costume for the TV cameras. And by the way, there was only 1 or 2 ambulances there. We've got all this video of the survivors of the shooting having to carry the wounded for blocks, you know, to get them some kind of help.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always vanilla pudding. Never chocolate, never strawberry. It's always vanilla, and it's just like incredible.
It really is.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, actually.
Well, unfortunately, these days it is very believable, and people need to start understanding this is business as usual for this government. When you find the government lying about 9/11 or Orlando or Sandy Hook or Boston or anything, it is not a unique and rare occurrence. It's how this government has controlled us all along, all the way back to torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania, and weapons. How much more do you have to be lied to before you understand this government rules you with lies, fraud, and deception? Alex, thank you very much for the phone call. The lines are really full. We're going to move to Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha, Bill. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Hey, the thing that got me was a 3-hour assault, right?
Yes.
This guy had 2 guns. Now, why would it go on for 3 hours? And so on and so forth. Are you going to tell me that there wasn't someone else in there with the government shooting these people if they were indeed shot?
Well, I mean, again, we have all these eyewitnesses who were saying at least 2, 3 other people were in there, plus the ones holding the doors from the outside. And let's think back to that Empire State shootout that happened a while back, where 9 bystanders were shot, all by the New York Police Department. Now, if you look at that video of the SWAT team doing the final assault on that nightclub, it looks like that last scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They just unloaded on that building. And I don't think we can rule out the possibility that a lot of the people who were killed and injured, were shot by the police.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Now, you said this firm that he worked for has Israeli connections?
Yes, G4S, and there's a whole bunch. G4S. There's a bunch of these security companies that are all underneath a parent corporation in Israel. Now, G4S Israel works as security and military operations in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. And these are guys who are not constrained to the law. Remember, Judicial Watch outed G4S here in the U.S. as literally getting the illegal immigrants as they came across the border and putting them in vans and driving them off to parts unknown so they couldn't be tracked and identified and deported.
Right, right. Well, they ran with the underwear bomber. They ran the security at that airport.
No, that was a different company.
A different company, but Israeli.
Yeah, still, yeah, it was an Israeli company, was in charge of all the gates supposedly used by the hijackers on 9/11. They were in charge of the gate that the shoe bomber and the crotch bomber all departed from. And remember, there were eyewitnesses who said that the crotch bomber was literally walked around security by somebody in a suit with a bunch of plastic tags.
Right, right.
Okay?
Yeah, well, I agree totally with your analysis of getting Trump's speech about Hillary off the page here. But, you know, they were supposed to come, both Hillary and Obama, to Green Bay, Wisconsin, on Wednesday, and they canceled that appearance. And I'm thinking they're putting their heads together trying to figure out how they're going to get out of this mess.
Well, I think they got themselves into this mess is what's going on here, but it was a rush job, and it's botched.
Yep.
And there were too many witnesses who saw contradictory information, and now basically they're trying to rewrite the story to deal with the information that's out on the independent media, like the multiple shooters and the guys holding the doors, and they're trying to maintain the lie, and it's coming apart because it wasn't really thought all the way through. Okay?
Right, I agree with you.
All right, well, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Randy in Texas. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, when is Trump supposed to deliver that speech on Hillary Clinton?
I think it's supposed to be happening today. In fact, it may have already happened, and it just absolutely was not being covered by the corporate media.
Yeah, and I've been doing a web search on transcript of Trump's speech, June 13th, 2016, and so far, no luck.
Well, I'm seeing, I've got a page at Facebook, and on the next commercial break, I'm going to go ahead and post it. But I need to look through. Yeah, this is the speech right here, and I'm going to go ahead and post it as soon as we hit the next commercial break.
Okay, it's going to be on your Facebook?
No, it's going to be on WhatReallyHappened.com.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Israel supplies the access, and Saudi Arabia supplies the warm bodies to do the operation. That could be just like 9/11.
Well, remember, the head of the CIA has come on out and said that there actually is zero evidence that Saudi Arabia had anything to do with 9/11. That whole idea of trying to blame Saudi Arabia for it was to justify an eventual attack and, of course, to keep the focus off of Israel. I mean, look at the U.S. government. Afghanistan did 9/11. No, we were wrong. It was Iraq. Let's go destroy them. No, we were wrong about that. Let's see. Who do we want to destroy next? Saudi Arabia. All right, Saudi Arabia did 9/11. And that's the game they've been playing.
Mike, I just wanted to find out if you're going to be talking about the Russian hyperglide vehicle when you bring up the Russian timetable there.
Yeah, we got that's further down on the talking points here, okay?
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to David in Mexico. David, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the possibility of this being a false flag, and of course it's a possibility, as always. But I wanted to ask you why you would address it as such, and then mention that this would be backlash from Middle Eastern, the information of the U.S. in the Middle East. Why would it be either?
Well, we're basically approaching this story from 2 points of view, okay? We're approaching it from the point of view that the official story is true, and showing why that indicates a massive failure of government. And then, of course, the other side is it's all false flags and lies. The point being that it doesn't matter whether you believe the official story or not. The end result still is the government has failed completely.
But isn't it inconsistent to even mention that it would be a result or a backlash?
No, I don't think it's inconsistent if we're talking in the context of stipulating for the point of the argument that this actually did in fact happen the way we're being told. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, the fact is the government is boxed in by this, regardless of whether people believe the official story or not. They have done themselves a huge amount of damage. Thank you for the phone call, David. We're going to let you go. We're falling way behind on our talking points here. And there is something that has to be remembered. Okay? The surveillance state failed to stop yet another terror attack. FBI failed. CIA failed. NSA failed. The White House failed. And if they get their little police state, will they be any more successful? No. Based on the current track record, absolutely not. Again, it comes down to a very simple choice. Either the government is creating these acts of terror and deserves to be fired, or the government is utterly impotent to protect us despite all the violations of our constitutional rights and deserves to be fired. There's no way out of this that makes the government look good. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, according to Michael German, who's a former FBI agent, he's saying that the FBI manufactures nearly all terrorist incidents. They find some vulnerable individual who's never committed any violence. Remember, this Omar Mateen has no prior criminal record whatsoever. He's squeaky clean. I remember one of these FBI entrapments, they literally found this panhandler, homeless guy on the street, took him to a store, said, buy this fuse and wire and battery, gave him the money to do it, and then arrested him and said, we've caught another terrorist. So now we have an ex-FBI agent saying, yeah, these guys are creating all this stuff to keep you scared, to keep you dependent. We took a poll at WhatReallyHappened.com. Do you believe the official story of the Orlando nightclub shooting? 97%. No. We're going to take one more phone call before the commercial break. Donna in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I just want to say thank you. You've done an excellent job in piecing these things together. And it didn't take very long for a lot of us to come to the same conclusion, but it really is helpful when you're connecting all the dots. And, we respond emotionally to any kind of attack on anybody. And then the dust settles a bit, and then you start thinking about things logically. But I want to ask you a question. Hello?
Yes.
How should Donald Trump respond to this? How do you think?
Well, I think Trump is definitely going to find this advantageous in hitting that open borders immigration issue. And I think Trump is probably going to take a stand saying that all of these gun-free zones and disarming of law-abiding citizens doesn't work to protect the citizenry. Remember, this perpetrator, if we believe the official story, was a guy with a state-issued firearms license who worked in security. Theoretically, somebody that the government would say, yeah, it's okay for this guy to have a gun.
My question pertains to his comments on Fox News this morning. And I'm not sure that this is the right idea because bombing in the Middle East has not helped us. We're more mired down and nothing is being won. Obviously, it's designed chaos. But his response to this morning on Fox News was that we need to escalate. And I'd like you to think about that.
Well, again, Trump is playing politics. He's very close to the White House, and he's trying to pander to what he perceives as the majority view of the American people. And because Obama and Clinton and the media are pushing ISIS, Trump is basically going to go along with that to show that he is not soft on terrorism and immigration the way that the Democrats are. So I think it's a political move. But certainly he is going to have a lot of support for his building walls on the borders and saying we have a right to decide who does and does not come into this country. And the Democrats are going to have a hard time countering that, given that they're building a wall around their Democratic National Convention, probably because of what's coming to light out there in California.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I'm just concerned about the language, and I can see that, you know, he's trying to please everyone, but I hope that will not be the plan to escalate things. It will not help things.
Well, there's going to be a little ritual when Donald Trump goes into that Oval Office. He's going to be given a briefing about what's really going on, and he's probably going to be appalled by it. But you know, once somebody actually gets into that White House, they do have to be told what's really going on, or they're going to make a serious misstep that threatens the entire government. So. A good example of that would be Harry Truman. When Roosevelt died and Harry Truman was sworn in as president, the first thing that he just went on in there and said, you remember that super weapon that you thought we were building and we slapped you down about that? Well, it turns out we really were building this thing after all. All right, Donna, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay, we're now getting a count. Apparently, there were 202 bullets fired in that Pulse nightclub shooting. That's a lot of ammunition for one guy to be carrying. That's a lot of ammunition. Okay, so. Now, Donald Trump is out there basically saying that ultimately Obama is responsible for what happened in Orlando because of the open borders situation. And again, we now have these indications that Hillary Clinton's State Department was shutting down investigations into various Muslim groups that they're now trying to tell us were linked to this atrocity. The propaganda is beginning to bite itself on the rear end on this. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We just put up a video at WhatReallyHappened.com from one of the press conferences down in Orlando, and one of the police officers in the background is smiling and laughing like it's all a big joke. All right, now we're getting word Donald Trump did have a speech earlier today, but he's made an announcement that his big speech about the crimes of the Clintons is going to be postponed, which was the right thing to do. Right now, the corporate media have the perfect excuse to give Trump zero coverage whatsoever. He's going to wait till things slow down, and then he's going to uncork on the Clintons. As well, he should. So, now before we leave this subject, because we've got other things we need to cover today, over in Israel not too long ago, there was an Israeli sniper who killed 13 Gaza children in one day. To terrorize the Palestinians, his jail sentence, 30 days. Going to be in prison 30 days for murdering 13 children. They called it an act of murder. They're not calling it an act of terror. See that little double standard going on there. We're talking about, Muslim immigrants here. Well, how about all those Mexicans coming across the border? Shouldn't we be calling them Christian immigrants? It's a little bit of a bias out there. Italy's parliament has approved a bill criminalizing Holocaust denial. Isn't that wonderful? And getting into politics and the candidates, this is where it's getting interesting. Out in California, people are realizing just how badly that election was rigged. We put up this YouTube video that is out there saying the best estimation, based on the polling, going into the election was Bernie Sanders should have had a landslide victory, 69% to 31%. Hillary is not loved in California. By the way, did you notice during the California primary they canceled the exit polls? They did not want a cross-check to what's going on. So far, they're finding 3 different methods of cheating were being used. First of all, people coming in with no party preference were given provisional ballots to fill out. Those provisional ballots were not counted. In fact, there are more ballots still uncounted in California than the total number of votes claimed for Hillary Clinton. Now, among demographics that favored Bernie Sanders, new voters, young voters, their registrations magically disappeared or were switched to GOP without their permission. And finally, poll workers in those precincts with electronic voting machines, and we had a caller call into the show. Bernie Sanders was winning 2-1 on all of these electronic machines at the precinct level, but somehow, by the time it got to the tabulation center, it had been flipped. Now, there's a lawsuit already underway to force a complete recount, including the provisional ballots. And if it does turn out that there was that huge a theft, it's going to change the game. Remember what I said, when you try and reverse a landslide, it's obvious to everybody what you did. That's what's happening out in California. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. We're going to take one more call on the subject of Orlando, and then there are really things I need to get onto that are equally important. Pat in Nevada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
First of all, I think that when we refer to Bill Clinton, we should say impeached Bill Clinton, because he was impeached.
He was impeached, but he was not removed from office, unfortunately.
Yes, but if you say impeached, it lets people know, even ones with the 80 IQ that support Hillary, that this has been going on for years. You want to stop things like Orlando? Don't give any benefits whatsoever to illegal immigrants.
Well, again...
and then they won't come.
Omar Mateen was born in this country. He was born in New York. His parents emigrated through the legal immigration process to come to this United States. And so it's going to be hard to kind of, make the point. I agree with you. We should be in control of our borders and decide who comes in and who does not. But in this case, this is why I say this guy doesn't fit the pattern. His family had money. He lived in a nice house. He had a kid. And he was set up. He was the patsy. He was the convenient dead body they had to leave by the ruins to sell the agenda. Anyway, listen, Pat, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We have other things that people ought to be paying attention to more than what happened at the Pulse nightclub. Okay? Apparently, over in Saudi Arabia, their crown prince came on out and announced Saudi Arabia has funded 20% of Hillary's presidential campaign. Now, I'm not sure what point he was trying to make about that, but there are two issues we need to look at. Do we want another president that is beholden to foreign governments? Second, it is illegal for foreigners to donate to presidential campaigns in this country. And assuming this Saudi crown prince isn't smoking opium, what he has just bragged about represents a criminal violation for Hillary's campaign. And it has to be looked into. And one more thing. For all of you ladies out there who believe that Hillary Clinton is pro-woman, Saudi Arabia has one of the worst records for abuse of women in the world. But as long as they're shoveling money at Hillary, she's going to look the other way. Now, Jimmy Carter's former strategist and pollster, Pat Cadell, was interviewed on Breitbart News and basically came on out and said this Clinton cash scandal is worse than Watergate. The Clintons were selling out the national interests of the United States directly to adversaries and others for money. This was the heart of Larry Klayman's RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. Foreign interests who donated to the foundation got favorable treatment from the State Department. We need to send a message to Hillary Clinton. This country is not for sale. When you become president, you do not own the place. It is not yours to do with as you will. And I still think the big, ugly secret hiding behind her email server was that she was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests in exchange for donations to her charitable foundation. Nobody wants to ask that question in the corporate media or the government, even to attempt to ridicule it. And I think the reason for that is when you ask that question, the reaction is always the same. Yeah, very well could be. Chinagate 1996. Now, Julian Assange has announced that WikiLeaks is getting ready to publish more Hillary Clinton emails, and he says some of them could very easily lead to indictments. Would love to see that happen. Big question. Where did WikiLeaks get the emails? Because if they know somebody who got into Hillary's email server, that's a second confirmation her server was breached. And allowing her server to be breached, that's a Title 18 violation. Now, Assange is out there saying that he's convinced U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch is not going to file charges no matter what. Hillary Clinton could go on out in front of her home in Chappaqua and set little children on fire, and Loretta Lynch isn't going to do anything because it's a woman. Women don't prosecute women no matter what they do. We're special. We're above the law. And Assange is saying the real danger here is that the FBI has got the goods on Hillary Clinton, and if there are no indictments, it does mean the FBI is going to be in a position to control the Clinton White House, along with everybody else in the world that Hillary sold secrets to for money. They can all blackmail her. The very last thing a Clinton presidency is going to be thinking about is the American people. We don't count. We don't have the blackmail goods on her. We can't harm her. Therefore, we are of not concern other than as a provider of more wealth and workers and soldiers. Now, one email that has surfaced from Hillary Clinton's State Department was talking about the invasion of Syria and how it would be good for Israel if regime change was brought about in Syria and the Russians wouldn't dare interfere with us. Which goes back to what I said about Washington, D.C. is running more on wishful thinking than careful analysis. So, over at the Judicial Watch lawsuit regarding the records regarding Hillary's email server, Brian Pagliano is now requesting that the court keep concealed the details of his immunity deal with the FBI. Now, this is getting to be a very convoluted story. Brian Pagliano has an immunity deal, which tells us there is a criminal investigation going on. The Judicial Watch lawsuit is not a criminal case. It's a civil case, an open records case. That's it. Nobody's talking about anybody going to jail. And they want to depose Brian Pagliano on how Hillary's private email server was set up. Now, Brian, through his lawyer, is saying he's going to take the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination regarding how the server was set up, thereby telling us there is something intentionally criminal about how the server was put together. There's no reason for him to be taking the Fifth Amendment if it's just an ordinary email server, is there? Now, the judge in the case said, wait a minute, you can't take the Fifth, you've got an immunity deal. And the State Department lawyers came on back and said, well, there are some exceptions to the immunity deal, and he can use the Fifth Amendment. And the judge said, let me see the deal. And now Brian Pagliano and his attorneys are saying, well, you can look at the deal. We can't refuse you. But please don't show it to anybody else. Please don't show it. It's hugely embarrassing to somebody somewhere. It's amazing. We have a video on WhatReallyHappened.com. It's a YouTube video of Hillary Clinton laughing about going to war against Iran. Somebody ought to just take all the times this lady has cackled about very serious things like, Gaddafi. We came, we saw, he died, ha 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 ha. And now she's laughing about war with Iran because she's not going to pay for it. Her kids aren't going to die in it. And she's out there saying, and I quote, the best thing that could happen to us is to be attacked by somebody because it would unify us and legitimize the regime. We're going to provoke an attack because then we will be in power for as long as anyone can imagine. She's telegraphing that they're provoking somebody to attack this nation because they believe that we'll all forget about the corruption and the crimes and we'll salute the flag and follow them off into war. I don't think so. Hillary, if you want war with Iran, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your day-glow jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture center. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we're going to call Tehran and tell them you are on your way to kick their butts all by yourself. But we, the American people, are going to sit this one out. We are sick and tired of war. We are sick and tired of finding out these are wars of conquest, not of national defense. We are sick and tired of seeing our kids in wheelchairs being ignored by the Veterans Affairs, the Veterans Administration. We're sick and tired of seeing our kids in cheap aluminum boxes draped with American flags that are made in China. We've had it. Enough is enough. If you want war, enlist and go. The rest of us are going to sit this one out here. Now, an article coming out of Activist Post asking a legitimate question. What's the difference between Trump's wall around the United States and the Democratic National Committee's wall around its Philadelphia convention? And we're not talking barricades. We're talking a real heavy wall manned by armed guards. And they may need it because of what's surfacing out in California. Hillary's trying to steal the country away from us. Now, in good news, and speaking of the VA, William Montague, the former head of the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center, is going to jail. Minimum sentence 2 years after pleading guilty to 64 corruption-related charges. So, now, let's talk about the war zones. One of our callers made reference to this before. Russia is developing a new generation of what they're calling gliders that guarantee penetration of any missile defense system. And this is a continuation of their maneuverable delivery technology that they've already got in the field with some of their nuclear missiles. All of the U.S. missile defense systems are based on a paradigm of an incoming threat following a predictable ballistic arc. And Russia has been able to obsolete all of that by simply developing final stages for their missiles that maneuver. They dipsy-doodle, they corkscrew, they weave back and forth, they go up and down, which makes prediction of where they're going to be a few seconds ahead impossible. Russia's been very, very clever. The United States has spent billions and billions of dollars on their ballistic missile defense system and THAAD and Patriot and all the rest of it. And Russia's able to defeat it for a tiny fraction of the cost. Russia has also embarked on a program to end dual citizenships. You are either Russian or you are something else. You are not allowed to be both. Sounds like a really good idea. We need that here in the United States. Now, over in Great Britain, the polls are continuing to show a major, major shift in favor of the Brexit. I think they're admitting it's leading by 19 points. Some of the online media polls, it's even further apart. Meanwhile, everybody's getting ready for the release of the Chilcot Report. And the Labour Party is looking at serious trouble. If there were war crimes charges for Tony Blair regarding Iraq, it could tear the Labour Party apart. And Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell has hinted he was going to call for war crimes charges against Tony Blair for his role in the Iraq War, prompting many of the Labour Blairites to threaten resignation. If you charge him with war crimes, we will quit. The proper reply to that is, go ahead and quit. Nice knowing you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, under pressure from Israel, Facebook and Twitter are starting to delete large amounts of Palestinian content. If you're Palestinian, you're not allowed freedom of speech because you say things that we don't like. Israel hates freedom of speech. Israel hates the Bill of Rights. The more Israel gains control of the U.S. federal government, the more our Constitution and Bill of Rights are being dropped into the shredder. Meanwhile, there's been another one of these Holocaust survivors, 90-year-old Joseph Hurt. He's literally, for the last 15 years, he's made a career out of traveling around lecturing schools about his amazing escape from Auschwitz. and it turned out to be another complete fraud. The teacher who uncovered the fraud, and it was apparently very sloppy, wasn't even all that well thought, is saying either this guy issues a public apology and acknowledgement of what he did, or he should face prosecution for all that money he took under false pretenses. Now, down in Venezuela, things are getting really, really ugly. Violent riots and looting are now a daily occurrence in Venezuela. There are videos coming on out of hungry people literally snatching food, chickens off of trucks driving by. And we need to keep a close look at what's going on there. Because when this economy implodes, and it's only a matter of time, the corporate supply chain will collapse. And the hard reality is that back in the 1930s, during that depression, most of the American population was still spread out across the country, living in rural areas with access to farms. Since then, most of the American people have been corralled up and herded into these large human ranches called cities, where there is no alternative if that supermarket runs out. And it's going to get very, very ugly. The former Morgan Stanley chief Asia economist is out there saying, don't listen to the ruling elite. The world economy is in real trouble. That 11th marble is hurtling back to Earth, and it's bigger than the asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs. China is now confirming they're liquidating U.S. Treasury bonds. They're dumping them. They're getting out as fast as they can. So is Saudi Arabia, but for different reasons. All right, getting on back to the Brexit. Leave takes a shocking 19-point lead in the Brexit poll. If it happens, they're saying gold will be the world's strongest currency. The paper euro could be worthless virtually overnight. Now, John Cleese, if you're as old as I am, you know John Cleese from Monty Python, Fawlty Towers. He played Q in a couple of the Bond films. He actually owned briefly a company that did inspirational corporate videos, which he sold for several $1 million. And he's out there saying that he's in favor of the Brexit and literally suggested hanging Jean-Claude Juncker. To which I would add possibly Draghi and maybe even Tony Blair. We have to disincentivize this kind of corruption and empire building for future generations. I'm not talking about revenge. I'm talking about sending a message. No, this stuff will not work ever again. Look at the history of France following the revolution. For a while there, they had a really good society. The government was focused on taking care of the French people and the French nation because they knew what the alternative was. Now, pro-Brexit political parties are already aware Parliament is considering simply ignoring the upcoming Brexit referendum and saying, we know what's best for you, and we're going to stay in the EU. And basically, what we're hearing from the Brexit people, if Parliament defies the public will on the Brexit vote, it will trigger a constitutional crisis. There'll be a demand for snap general elections to replace them all. Interestingly enough, one of David Cameron's biggest donors has withdrawn all financial support for the Conservatives and is threatening to quit the party entirely over the way Cameron has handled the referendum. This is going to be contentious, and it's coming up here in, well, just 10 days' time. Boy, you thought California was an obvious stolen election or the Scottish independence referendum. I guarantee you they're going to be trying to steal this. They'll be burning pro-Brexit votes there in Piccadilly Square and saying, what are you going to do about it now, huh? David Cameron's already announced he will not resign, even if Brexit wins. Doesn't want to give up that nice cushy job over there at number 10. Now, the EU not only has its handfuls with a sudden surge in favor of Brexit. It has to deal with the move for secession in many of the other EU states and the popularity of Spain's Eurosceptic United We Can party. Spain may all of a sudden be looking at an exit. And Europe is bracing for a mass rebellion against the EU. The Brexit will only be the first of many. It's all coming apart. This new world order is coming apart. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call from the Analog Anarchist up in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm looking at what to me is a new English language international news channel. I'm getting it on the satellite Galaxy 19. I'm sure they're on the internet. It used to sign as TRT1, and now it's TRT World. It's a highly produced. What could we expect out of Turkey in the political situation? Maybe it's the USIA. Who knows? But I'm looking at the Orlando scene, and they mentioned that the Orlando police got to use their new tank to knock down the wall of the building when they did the raid.
Ooh, that must have been fun.
It's TRT World. It's on Galaxy 19, which is 97 degrees west on KU. It's on 11959 vertical, video 102, audio 103. The newscasters seem to be, remember when the Al Jazeera English or Al Jazeera America came on, they had mostly Britishers with a British accent. That seems to be what this is. I've only had it on for a few hours. It's covering a lot of U.S. type news. Also, if anybody's looking for Yemen TV, which is off their channel, look on TV7 Tunis is carrying Yemen TV, very low quality video. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now then, interesting little story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, a lot of these Muslim refugees were lured to Europe with a lot of promises. They were going to get free stuff. They were going to get free homes. They were going to get TVs. They were going to get cable. They were going to get this. They were going to get that. And there were videos of some of these refugees who'd arrived in Europe and said, wait a minute, where's all the free stuff we were told about, we were promised? And, of course, the corporate media is saying, oh, no, nobody was making these promises. Well, apparently at this point, those people smugglers are now starting to make money in both directions. And a lot of these disgruntled freeloaders in Greece, which doesn't have the money to support a huge new influx of refugees, are now paying the smugglers to take them on back to Turkey. I'm sure Erdogan doesn't want them. He wants to shove them over to Europe. So this could get really ugly. But it appears to be the start of a new trend, as it were. Boy, they really botched this one up tremendously, didn't they? All righty, let me skip on down here and grab something. Interestingly enough, there's an article that came out of American Thinker. And as more and more attention is starting to turn to past deceptions by the U.S. government, American Thinker has been running a series of stories on the accidental shoot-down of TWA 800. And apparently, in response to the article, some people who are no longer employed by the government are starting to come forward and report what they know. And they're quoting a former air traffic controller who was there when TWA 800 met its fate. Now, he wasn't actually handling that aircraft, but everybody was watching the radar scopes. And they're confirming their radar did pick up a non-transpondered object rising rapidly from the surface of the ocean and intersecting TWA 800 just seconds before its data block vanished from the radar. Now, for those who've been paying attention all along, it's no big surprise, but time does make ancient truth uncouth. Meanwhile, out in Oakland, they're dealing with a big scandal there, a sex scandal. There's a woman out there saying that she's been forced to have sex with dozens and dozens of officers, which means that all of these officers are now wide open to blackmail by anybody who's got that information. Interesting. Paul Craig Roberts has a wonderful article on the frustrations of telling the truth, because he's been trying to do it ever since he was working in the White House. He says, sometimes you have to deal. People believe the lies that define their reality because they lack the education and emotional and intellectual strength to actually confront reality. And that's true. And it is frustrating. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And this portion of the program, I want to talk about America's history and America's founding, the founding principles. Now, as we slide down that long chute into tyranny and dictatorship, those of us who are out there talking about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights have become a very strong voice. And the government's response has been to move away from trying to convince us what they're doing complies with the founding documents into simply declaring them arbitrarily as outdated. They're irrelevant. They're almost 250 years old. They've got no meaning today. Well, the fact is the Constitution does change over time through the approved process of amendment. And today's Constitution bears little resemblance to the one signed in Congress all those years ago. Like the White House itself, very little of the original actually remains, but the founding principles are still there. For government to be legitimate and legal, it must constrain itself within the limits imposed by that Constitution. Now, as for the Declaration of Independence, it was never the law of the land, but a symbolic statement, a listing of the reasons that drove the group of British subjects living in the American colonies to decide they were better off by themselves. It is relevant today. In fact, it's more relevant today than at any time I've been alive. Now, to understand what led to the Declaration of Independence, you need to understand life as it was when the document was drafted. The American colonists, who still thought of themselves as British, were constrained by various laws which forced them to be dependent on Great Britain for everything they needed to Britain's gain. The American colonists were required to buy those products they could not make for themselves from the British East India Company. The British East India Company, a too-big-to-fail company of its day, was actually in serious financial difficulties, and Parliament passed the Tea Act as a form of bailout at the colonists' expense. Granted an exclusive monopoly, the British East India Company shipped poor-quality tea at inflated prices to the colonies, which is a move that accelerated the American preference for coffee over tea in the following decades. Now, so bad was the tea being sold to the colonies by the British East India Company, the Dutch actually ran a successful tea smuggling operation. And this triggered the Boston Tea Party, the first and most famous of all these protests in which colonists raided British ships and dumped the tea overboard. Now, most Americans, including George Washington, disapproved of the Boston Tea Party. But Britain's overreaction of annulling all self-government, increasing the quartering of soldiers, and closing Boston Harbor until damages were paid, which is a form of collective punishment, was called the Intolerable Acts by the colonists, and these turned public sympathy away from the Crown and towards the movement for independence, leading directly to the formation of the First Continental Congress. But by far the worst abuse was King George III's Currency Act, which banned the colonies from coining their own money and required all transactions be carried out using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England, a practice that reduced the colonies to the same desperate poverty as the common people in Britain, as you will find in the writings of the time by authors such as Charles Dickens. Now, we find modern echoes of that same mercantilism occurring again today, with governments saying we must buy certain products, such as vaccines, and only from government-approved sources, and the requiring of citizens to conduct all transactions using banknotes borrowed at interest from privately owned central banks has its modern descendant in the Federal Reserve System. Now, what follows is a list of some of the specific complaints lodged by the writers of the Declaration of Independence together with their modern counterparts. From the Declaration, he has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Now, the colonists petitioned King George III to pass laws that would improve their lives. But in an age where taxing individual citizens directly was impractical, the king relied on taxes collected from the nobility, paid for from the rents commoners paid to live on their lands. Now, as a side note, this is the reason that the right to property was replaced with the right to the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration in order to preserve the landowners as a source of revenue for the new government. Now, under pressure from the British nobility, many of whom were invested in the various businesses trading with the colonies, King George III simply ignored petitions for any laws that might inconvenience his friends and financial supporters. We see that same refusal to pass laws for the public good to please the financial nobility in the current debates about laws regarding GMO labeling and fracking. Again, from the Declaration, he has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent shall be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. Now, King George III was a believer in central control. Given his upbringing, it's easy to understand why. King George III insisted that no laws could be passed in the colonies without his direct approval. But between the time required to send messages back and forth across the Atlantic and simple inattention by the king, many laws requiring immediate attention were delayed until long after their original purpose has faded. Today we are seeing a continuance of the transition from self-governing states as created by the original Constitution to a system of central control in Washington, D.C. Much of that transition occurred after the American Civil War, which was not really so much about slavery as a state's right to be independent and, if need be, to lead the Union. Now, today we see the government engaged in a massive land grab under various excuses to seize public and, in some cases, private lands for economic exploitation and collateral on the U.S. debt. All of these land grabs are a violation of the Enclave Clause of the Constitution, which states the federal government can only own the land underneath federal buildings and various federal government infrastructure such as airports, harbors, and military bases. Again, going back to the Declaration. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodations of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right to representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. Now, what was going on is as the population of the colonies was growing, King George III sought to limit their influence by Parliament by refusing to allow colonies to grow larger unless the citizens of that colony voluntarily relinquished their right to representation in the Parliament. That was where this whole taxation without representation issue began. Now, today we see something similar going on. It's a lot more subtle, with gerrymandering shaping districts to suit political agendas, and the massive problem we have with election fraud in this nation, especially with what's going on out there in California. From the Declaration, he has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. Now, the judiciary of the United States is established by the Constitution and may not be tampered with. But obstruction has now become possible by the use of presidential executive orders and signing statements which have been used without legal justification to bypass or even change the will of Congress and the Supreme Court. From the Declaration, he has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. One glaring example that this system of political patronage still exists was seen in that recent RICO lawsuit brought by Judicial Watch founder Larry Klayman against the Clinton Foundation. The judge, appointed by President Bill Clinton, refused to recuse himself over the obvious conflict of interest, then threw the case out of court without examination of the evidence. From the Declaration, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. King George III took William Shakespeare's advice from Henry IV, Part 2, to heart. Be it thy course to busy, giddy minds. In other words, keep the people constantly running in circles with paperwork, and they'll have no time left to ponder the desirability of the government as a whole. And all those offices, paid for by the people, were ways to keep those working in those offices loyal to the king. Today, there are 542 separate U.S. government agencies on top of hundreds more at the state and local levels. From the Declaration, he's kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. We see a modern counterpart in the militarization of our domestic police departments, who murder more innocent Americans every year than the mass shooters and terrorists put together, and how, under the civil forfeiture laws, steal more from law-abiding Americans than the robbers, burglars, and muggers put together. From the Declaration, he is affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. Now, under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war, yet we've seen over the last several administrations how presidents order our military into invasions with only an occasional rubber stamp from Congress as an afterthought. From the Declaration, he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. As most recently demonstrated by Mario Cuomo, the U.S. government is abandoning the principle of freedom of speech and imposing censorship to please the government of Israel. From the Declaration, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. Now, King George III ordered that colonial homes provide accommodations for British officers. While it is true that living in a proper house was more comfortable than living in tents, the real purpose was for the British officers to be able to spy on the colonials to keep them in line. Such forced quartering was primarily aimed at the homes of those known to be sympathetic to the cause of freedom. Today, the United States government no longer needs to quarter officers in our homes to spy on us. The NSA, in complete violation of the Fourth Amendment right to privacy, has compromised all public telecommunications, our computers, our smartphones, tablets, email, in order to spy on us far more completely than was possible in the time of King George III. From the Declaration, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Now, referring back to the militarization of the domestic police forces, it is very rare to see any police officer punished for killing a law-abiding U.S. citizen. All we hear is it's in conformance with departmental policy. End of story. From the Declaration, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Sanctions against Iran, sanctions against Russia, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Need I say more about that? From the Declaration, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. There are now 97 taxes that Americans are paying. And needless to say, those taxes do not actually go for what they claim to be. The U.S. government, desperately broken in debt because of that private central bank, spends our money, propping up Wall Street, paying for war, and of course, endless support for Israel. Not on the list yet is the coming carbon tax, purportedly to fight human-caused global warming and save Manhattan from being drowned. It's actually just another cash grab on behalf of that private central bank. From the Declaration, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. Now, the British right to trial by jury dates back to the Magna Carta itself. But in the days of King George III, certain classes of offense were declared ineligible, putting the defendant at the mercy of corrupt judges and prosecutors. Ever hear the law of the hammer? If you give a small child a hammer, everything they encounter afterwards needs pounding. The same thing applies to legislatures. Once given the power to make laws, they will pass laws for everything in order to justify their expense and provide fodder for election year speeches. But that enormous body of laws controlling our every behavior, such as collecting rainwater on your own property, does come at a huge cost, as enforcement and judicial proceedings absorb more and more of the gross domestic product. But government never admits error. And so rather than reducing the number of laws, government is now eroding our right to a trial by jury, even though the Sixth Amendment, which guarantees our right to trial by jury, lists no exceptions. But in the current United States, you can be denied a jury trial for certain lesser offenses, such as drunk driving or any crime for which the prison sentence is 6 months or less. From the Declaration, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. I've got one word for that, Guantanamo. From the Declaration, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. The United States uses the plural because it was started as a loose confederation of independent sovereign states. The central government was limited to acting as an arbiter with little or no authority inside the states themselves. Now, the Civil War was triggered by the secession of the South to get away from what was perceived as Washington, D.C.'s increased unconstitutional intrusion into the state's internal business. Abraham Lincoln needed to invade and conquer the Confederacy because in that time, the lion's share of tax revenues came from the South. So Lincoln seized on the issue of slavery to motivate the North into war, much as the United States government uses 9/11 every time they wish to invade someplace for purely monetary reasons. Now, following the war, the U.S. government moved quickly to centralize power. The 17th Amendment stripped the states of their rights to select their own senators and turned the office of senator into a publicly elected office. This made senators much less beholden to their state legislators and governors, who were weakened as a result of this change. Today, we see more moves by Washington, D.C. to acquire rights and authorities originally delegated to the states and the people, including the federalization of the National Guard and blockages of various states' attempts to enforce their own borders. From the Declaration, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Again, we refer to the abuse of the presidential executive order. From the Constitution, he has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Again, we are outside the protections of the Constitution by edict of the government, while the NSA spies on us and the domestic police make war on us. From the Declaration, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. One only has to read the many stories of the Bureau of Land Management's seizing of private lands to see that this evil has also returned. Declaration. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. Open borders to illegal immigrants and refugees. We have to take a break for commercials. We'll come back with the story after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're talking about the Declaration of Independence and how society today is very much in the same condition as the American colonies were that led to the creation of the Declaration of Independence. If one looks, one can easily find more examples that illustrate this fact, that the modern 21st century American citizen is in fact returned to the same state of oppression, exploitation, and control as was the case in 1776. Now, the forms may differ, but the intent is clearly the same. And I'm going to close with one last quote from the Declaration of Independence. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. We're back there. We're going to take a phone call. Wes in Idaho. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Subject is the Founding Fathers. I'm looking at a list here, 204 names of the senators, the people that composed the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, Constitution, the first senators, and the first congressmen. There are no Muslims, no Hindus, no Buddhists, no atheists, no secular humanists, no Jews.
Wait a minute. That's not true. That last one is not true. There were some Jews.
There's a Jew in there?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, more than a few. In fact, I'm blanking on his name, but the original furnishings for the Capitol building were donated by a Jewish member of the Assembly. Also, there were no women. There were no Native Americans. There were no blacks.
Right.
In fact, the first black member of Congress, if I recall correctly, was named Pinckney Pinchback, and he was actually an associate of one of the last of the Mississippi riverboat gamblers, George Duvall. But following the Civil War and the Reconstruction, he actually became assistant to Louisiana's governor, and then he actually wound up in Congress. Okay?
The point is, hello? Still there?
Yeah, I'm not sure I like where you're going with this. What's the point you're trying to make?
Well, USA was founded by a great majority, 98%, 99%, maybe there's 1 or 2% by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. It goes back to the Magna Carta, goes back to the Scottish Declaration of Independence. The point I'm trying to make is USA was founded by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. However, it has changed. There is not one white Anglo-Saxon Protestant on the Supreme Court any longer. Not one WASP on the Board of Federal Reserve. Not really. Very few WASP down in Hollywood.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's been openly declared a war on white people in this country, and okay, we gotta let you go. Thank you for the phone call. Thank you for the phone call. We gotta let you go and take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open 800-313-9443, and okay, I'm getting nagged by my control room here again. Apparently we have a new system. I'll have to get that the next commercial break. Okay. All right, I'm looking at a story here from the New York Post in which Orlando's chief of police has said they cannot rule out the possibility that some of the victims in that nightclub were actually killed by friendly fire. But he's bad for killing people, and in ours, it's just part of the job here. They're actually now admitting, and it's hard not to. Again, if you look at that video of the final assault on that nightclub, it looks like that closing scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They just uncork on everything. Alrighty, getting on back to the news. It's apparently snowing on Big White up there in western Canada. And as usual, when they're reporting on the strange occurrence of June snow, there's always a paragraph in there. But you know, the week ago we had record high temperatures according to our government paid for weather forecast. They're reporting sky high temperatures. Who knew snow? Apparently, the snow level is now dropping in the Cascade Mountains in the Pacific Northwest. It's only June, and it looks like winter may actually already be coming up, coming early. It's amazing. Now, the other day, and we're poking fun at it, Obama was talking about, the need for the carbon tax, and we've got to deal with climate change, or Manhattan's going to be underwater, and he's been chastised for that because it isn't science, it's science fiction. And they make specific reference to a movie I worked on, The Day After Tomorrow. Have you ever seen that experiment where you take a glass of water and it's got an ice cube in there and you use an eyedropper to just put the water right up to the very top of the glass and then you wait for the ice to melt, at which point you would expect that the water would overflow the glass, only it never happens. The same thing is true for the oceans and the Arctic ice cap. Because ice shrinks as it melts into water. It's very unusual behavior for the material, but that's why ice floats. It's less dense than the water. And after November, Obama's going to hit you with that carbon tax because he needs more of your money. He needs much, much more of your money. All right. Let's see. All right, we're going to open the phone lines back up again. I know we had them closed during that whole thing about the declaration. Latest numbers coming out of the CDC are showing that adult participation in vaccinations is in decline. People aren't trusting the vaccines anymore. They're very concerned about what's going on. And what we're probably going to see is the government will start passing laws mandating adult vaccinations the way they're already doing with school children. because vaccines are a $27 billion a year business that pays taxes, and our government cannot allow any business that is paying in taxes to go into decline, even for the silly little reason that might actually be selling useless and potentially harmful products. Okay, now I've got the information here. We have a new feature here at Republic Broadcasting, courtesy of Zeno Radio, and apparently it's called the 9-Wide System. You can call into the show to listen to the program, and the number is 605-562-5111. And it's a multi-line platform. It's got a 128K feed for best quality. And we're working to improve our technical issues, and I know I've been getting a lot of complaints and everything, but just please bear with us while we get all of this stuff taken care of. So again, you can listen live to our show at 605-562-5111. All right, getting on back to the news. Now then, not too long ago, there was this woman, Jennifer Hibben White, and she put up a Facebook post saying that her newborn baby had contracted the measles due to those anti-vaxxers. And as it turned out, this Jennifer Hibben White is financially tied to Big Pharma. And it turns out this Facebook post was a marketing campaign in disguise. In other words, some public relations or advertising agency put together this Facebook post. This Jennifer Hibben White became the face of the post and put it on out there. My baby's getting measles from the anti-vaxxers. And it was a complete lie. It was a complete hoax. Remember, we have been seeing time and time again where there'll be an outbreak of measles or mumps, and of course they'll scream, this is why you should get the vaccine. Then we find out the people who came down with the illness had the vaccines. It happened at Harvard not too long ago. Oh, there's a mumps epidemic among our students, get the vaccine. And then they find out all the kids who'd come down with the mumps had had the vaccination. Now, a lot of vaccines will work with what is called an attenuated pathogen, which is where they'll take the infecting agent, they'll slap it around to weaken it, throw it in a test tube with a bunch of other chemicals, the adjuvants, and then they shoot that into your arm. But there's a risk there, because it has happened time and time and time again that an attenuated pathogen can spontaneously revert to full potency inside the body. They had a big problem with that with the oral polio vaccine a few years ago. And then all of a sudden today we're dealing with these polio-like syndromes. It's got all the symptoms of polio, but trust us, it isn't polio. Really, don't even think it's got anything to do with that vaccine here. Meanwhile, two drug companies, Genentech and OSI Pharmaceuticals, have agreed to pay $67 million to settle a whistleblower lawsuit accusing them of deliberately misleading doctors about the effectiveness of a cancer drug called Tarceva. But as part of the agreement, neither drug company was required to admit guilt. We didn't do anything wrong. Here's $67 million, but we didn't do anything wrong whatsoever. Now then, here's a bizarre story. And this is up in Manatee, where they've got this new dog, which they got from the shelter. And they're proclaiming how this didn't cost the taxpayers anything. But they've got a 14-month-old puppy, Gia, who has been apparently trained to sniff out a chemical that is used in the construction of flash drives in order to hide memory sticks and flash drives that are in concealed locations. And they're justifying all of this by saying this dog is trained to sniff out child pornography. Now, obviously, no dog is going to be able to sniff what's actually on the flash drive, even if this actually works, and this isn't just another case of the dog getting subtle cues from the handler. They're going to be getting flash drives from people who are backing up harmless and legal data, It's a fishing expedition, is what it is. In any event, I mean, there are so many tricks to confuse dog sniffers. You see them in movies. Baby powder, coffee grounds, all kinds of stuff. And it does seem to get rather ridiculous. Okay, now, there's been a new study admits antidepressants increase suicide attempts in teens and are completely worthless for actually treating depression. Now, this is coming out of Natural News, and it was originally reported in The Lancet. Now, The Lancet is considered one of the top, most prestigious journals in the world. It's not one of these little journals, operates out of a one-room office, and they'll publish your paper for any kind of money. The Lancet is highly respected, along with the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine. These are the top ones. So when you have The Lancet out there reporting on the most comprehensive analysis to date of the safety and efficacy of widely prescribed antidepressants, they're finding out more risks than benefits, significant increase of suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts. Even CBS was forced to report this. We have been talking about this all along because every time there's another mass shooting that the gun grabbers wag at us, it always comes out these shooters are either on or withdrawing from these medications. And it's when you're withdrawing that you are at greatest risk of something going horribly wrong. Now, I actually went through this myself many years ago. This is why I know what I'm talking about here. Many years ago when I was in the process of breaking up my first marriage, in a fit of good taste, and I went to see my doctor about a completely unrelated matter. And while I was there, she was saying, you know, how are you handling the breakup of your marriage? And I said, well, I'm not entirely cheerful. And she said, here, take this. This will make you feel better. And I wish I could remember the exact name of what she had prescribed for me. And so I took them, I followed the directions on the bottle, and I felt great. I was happy. I was fun to be with for 4 weeks. And then week number 5, there was this horrible chemical backlash, and I went into this absolutely black depression, and the only way I got through it is I just kept saying over and over again, it's the medication, it's the medication, it's the medication, it's the medication. And I threw the pills away, and I will not touch them ever again. On the main page at WhatReallyHappened.com, over in the right menu, you're going to see this giant capsule, and you need to click it because it will take you to a page where all these videos and research information, these prescription psychiatric medications are dangerous. And now we have the Lancet actually admitting what we were telling you years ago. But it makes money. That's all that matters. It makes money. We're going to take a phone call. Jason in Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to see. I haven't listened to the whole show. I missed the first part. So I wanted to see if you had seen the article about the Christian singer Christina Grimmie that was shot in Orlando Friday night.
Yeah, I'd seen. We mentioned it briefly of, Orlando being a very, very dangerous town.
Okay. Well, I just haven't seen the mainstream media, especially Fox or any of the other ones, really touch on it at all, except for maybe some articles that they had put on the internet. So I didn't know if you had mentioned it or if anybody else really had spoken about it. That's all I have for you.
Okay, well, we had mentioned it briefly in passing, but obviously it's been overshadowed by the events at the Pulse nightclub. And again, this is grist for the mill for the gun grabbers. But again, I think it's time to start looking at the fact that we are literally driving ourselves crazy on these prescription psychiatric medications. And right now, 1 out of 4 Americans are taking some form of these medications. And then we wonder why everybody seems to be going nuts around us. In the quest for pharmaceutical profits, we're literally driving our own population insane, making them violent, making them suicidal. Okay? I guess Jason hung up. But yeah, I look at how this lust for money to keep The bankers happy to keep paying the unpayable debt. It's destroying the best qualities of what it is to be an American. We don't care about our friends and neighbors anymore. We don't care about making quality products. It's just whatever gets out there that brings in money, that's good. And anything else is bad. And our stores are filled with poor quality products. In fact, the other day at Sam's Club, my wife Claire bought me a little toy flying drone. And I was just starting to get the hang of that thing, and it died. And yes, I could take it on back and they'll give me a new one, but I don't want a product where I have to go back every month to get a new replacement. I want to go back to an America that makes products that are durable and that last. This planned obsolescence, maybe it's tolerable in a healthy economy, not in an economy that's in as much trouble as this one. We need to have simple, elegant, reliable products. And the same thing applies to software. One of the reasons that we're having so much difficulty maintaining our websites, having bug-free appliances, is in the quest for more standards and selling more books and the rest of it. We've allowed our software infrastructure to just grow in complexity, and it's just bloated, and it's reached the point where we cannot effectively maintain it any longer. And that's why you have a Windows 10 that comes out with thousands and thousands of bugs. We literally are no longer able to support our own technology, and there's a warning sign in that. When Rome was at the height of its greatness, it came up with all kinds of wonderful things like concrete, aqueducts, viniculture, medicine. And then as Rome started into decline because of its accumulating debt, it started running out of money to maintain things, and the aqueducts began to fall apart, and the roads began to crumble in some places. Actually, some of them still work. They were obviously built better than what we build today. But when you have... hang on a second. Anyway, I wondered why we weren't getting any calls. When you have a civilization, and you are building infrastructure, you have to also take into your calculations the ability to maintain it in the future, cost effectively. And too many projects are being put out there using technology that is very difficult and dangerous, expensive to maintain. We're dealing with one here in Hawaii, this light rail system. Now the current estimates are $8 billion, and it won't be ready to use until 2024. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I was wondering why your people weren't calling in more.
Yeah, I told them to turn off the calls during that thing about the declaration, but I forgot to tell them to turn it back on again.
Oh, I see. That's not why I called in. But anyway, just wanted to mention that a few days ago when they were announcing that ISIS is going to attack, my first thought is, okay, that means that the West is going to do a false flag, because we all know that ISIS comes from Al-Qaeda, and we all know that Al-Qaeda comes from CIA. And then now I'm reading in the media, has ISIS infiltrated the CIA or the FBI? Because the shooter was working in the department for the last number of years. So for those of us that have eyes to see and ears to hear, it's really obvious what's going on here.
Well, here's the deal. This was a rush job, okay, and they didn't really think it all the way through. They're not able to deal with the fact that there are literally millions of Americans looking for reasons not to accept the official story, and we're hitting pay dirt. And so today we're seeing them try and run around and alter the story to deal with all this embarrassing stuff that's surfacing. I mean, originally they said he wasn't on a terrorist database. Oh, that's embarrassing. Yes, he was on the terrorist database. Well, isn't that embarrassing, too, because you knew this guy might be a problem and you didn't do anything about it. At the very least, with all this talk about how he was dealing with mental illness of some kind, why wasn't his state firearm permit revoked? I mean, they're in a real corner with this. If the official story is true, okay, then government at all levels utterly failed. If they made this all up as a false flag attack, it's still another reason to say, I don't want to live under this government any longer. Okay?
Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what this one is. It's not helping the takeover, so it almost seems like it's organic in one way. On the other hand, it's got all the signs of being something fishy about it by the fact that this guy's under investigation and they didn't stop him and that he's working in the departments and, you know, but then it hit the fact that it's the gay bar, that helps they think this might help the Hillary team. That's all.
Oh, yeah, and the anti-gun agenda. I mean, they were trying to hit all the buttons, but as Donald Trump has correctly pointed out, this pro-immigration and pro-gay agenda just had a head-on collision. Because this pro-immigration, pro-refugee agenda is bringing people into this country with a cultural revulsion to homosexuality. You can't have it both ways. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mateus. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And, all right, let's see. Getting into the world of computers, and this is referencing back to what I said about having allowed our software infrastructure to just grow and mutate into this horribly bloated, impossible to maintain monstrosity. And I'll give you an example. I wrote an article about this about a week ago called, you know, Blink, Don't Blink. And it was talking about how when HTML first came on out, if you wanted a section of text in your web page to blink, all you had to do was put the blink tag in front of it and the stop blink tag after. That was it. It was done. Today, because most browsers have stopped recognizing and responding to those original HTML tags, you have to have an open tag and a close tag around your text, followed by 43 additional lines of code. That's what I mean about the evolution of bloat. And we have these industry insiders that are constantly changing the standards, and it doesn't make anything better. What it does is stimulate the business of textbooks and classes to teach the new standards. And the end result is it's just become a huge, hideously complicated system that nobody can make work, not even the people working on the F-35 software. And we need to go back to simple, elegant things that work, whether it's software, hardware, or what else. Now, story coming out from RINF.com. Apparently, the Defense Department hired a bunch of hackers to test the security of the non-secure computer networks at the Pentagon. They weren't allowed to play with the secure machines because supposedly they're air-gapped. And apparently the hackers found more than 100 vulnerabilities in the Pentagon's own computer systems. So tell me again why we can be certain that Hillary's private email server was not broached, was not breached, rather, was not invaded. Story coming out of RINF.com, there's been a new development. Now, as you know, when Hillary Clinton, when the server came on up, Hillary Clinton's first defense was no classified information was sent or received on her private server. Now, that one really didn't hold up to examination because we know the job of Secretary of State involves a lot of classified information. And if Hillary wasn't using her State Department account, and she wasn't handling classified information on her private server, what server was she using? Was there a third server? Well, then Hillary had to back off and tried to defend herself, saying that nothing that was sent or received on her private survey was marked classified at the time. It was always classified after the fact. And I'm not to blame for that. Now, that statement is a flat-out lie. There are certain categories of information, the names of CIA undercover personnel, imminent drone strikes, details on U.S. NSA sources and methods. Satellite intelligence is classified at creation. This kind of information never exists in an unclassified form. Taking the classification headers off does not declassify them. In fact, removing the classification headers from a classified document is a violation of Title 18, Section 793, which we know Hillary did. She sent an email to her subordinate, Jacob Sullivan. Strip the classification headings from this document and send it to me non-secure. And it doesn't matter why she did it. It doesn't matter what was in the document. It doesn't even matter if Jacob Sullivan refused to do it. It's a felony violation of Title 18. Well, in the latest batch of Hillary emails, an email has been discovered that carries a clear classification marking. It was marked classified when it was received by Hillary Clinton on her private email server. So she's been caught lying yet again. This is a person who lies, cheats, and steals to get what they want. And they need to be held, Hillary needs to be held to account. We dare not allow somebody this reckless, this ambitious, this dangerous to have the keys to the nuclear weapons. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and I'm going to apologize to our BAM user viewers. We seem to be having some technical difficulties with our sound coming from RBN. Getting on back to the news here. As you know, there was a story that came on out how the father of the accused shooter in Orlando had visited the State Department. The State Department then immediately came on out and said, we have no record of it. We'd stored it on Lois Lerner's hard drive. Well, now there's a new revelation from Blacklisted News that the shooter's father is a long-time asset of the Central Intelligence Agency, and he's got a TV show that receives funding from the Voice of America, which is a known CIA propaganda operation. So this is getting darker and darker as we go along. And again, it's like a repeat of what happened with Osama bin Laden. Oh, Osama bin Laden. Then we find out that the bin Laden family is all buddy. They get all these government construction contracts. Osama's older brother, Salim bin Laden, was business partners with George W. Bush and Arbusto Energy. Remember when Hinckley took a shot at Reagan, and the Bush family was going to have dinner with the Hinckley family that very night? I guess when you're at that, I think Game of Thrones, yes, we're going to use our children for these ill purposes. There's too many of these piling up. Now, story coming out of Washington's blog. Apparently, the Huffington Post Bloggers Club is offering $25,000 for hard evidence that the shooting at the Pulse nightclub was a staged false flag event. So they're starting to put some money on out there. And for $25,000, they might well lure somebody out of the word work to say, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Now, here's a little bit of an irony. Thousands of Florida residents formed long lines around blood collection centers in Orlando to donate blood for the survivors of the shooting. Apparently, though, current rules are that gay men are not allowed to donate blood because of the continuing health problems that they're suffering, going back to HIV and hepatitis and the rest of it. And not all of those health problems appear to be the fault of the gay men. There were some experimental vaccine programs, and of course we understand that the HIV virus may have been an accidental product of the African smallpox vaccination campaign, because the way they were manufacturing the vaccine was just, it was sloppy, it was poor laboratory technique. Now, over in France, the protests, the strikes, the rioting against austerity are continuing. This is now the largest public uprising against the French government since the French Revolution. And now French President Francois Hollande and Prime Minister Manuel Valls are threatening to crush ongoing strikes. Literally call out the military and just crush the protesters. You will live your lives in servitude to those private central bankers. That's the New World Order, and you might as well get used to the idea right now. Now, out here in Hawaii, there is a battle going on between organic producers and Monsanto. And apparently on the 15th of this month, 2 days, 2 days from now, there's going to be a panel of federal judges from the Ninth Circuit Court are going to meet in Honolulu to hear oral arguments about 4 cases that may result in the environmental equivalent of a Citizens United decision. Now, this appellate court is either going to uphold or overturn 4 recent decisions by the lower federal district court in Hawaii that invalidated the power of county governments to enact laws to protect public health and environment. Remember what I was pointing out in the Declaration of Independence? How the Crown was blocking laws for the common good to support his financial backers. We're seeing the same thing here. We're going to strip away from you your authority to make healthy choices for yourself and your people. We're usurping your power. Now, there are cases involving the islands of Kauai and the Big Island of Hawaii in which federal judges struck down the local government laws saying no GMO. Go back and read that part of the Declaration of Independence. That was one of the grievances the colonists had against King George III. There were laws that needed to be passed for the general good that were being blocked. The authority of the local governments was being stripped away. We're there. We're back in 1776. Now, speaking of organic, and this is a positive development, over at Government Slaves, they're talking about a big stink where there was this farmer, Bernard Saul, who was selling hundreds of thousands of pounds of supposedly organic alfalfa seeds over an 8-month period. And he was basically sending the seeds through to be coated, which is a process to increase reliability when it comes to planting. But an Idaho state inspector, not federal government, state inspector, did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and discovered this volume of seeds was impossible for Bernard Saul's farm. His farm is only 48 acres. It was only capable of delivering 15% of that total. And it turned out what Bernard Saul was doing was buying GMO alfalfa seeds and reselling them as organic, because right now any organic produce or seeds command a much, much higher price. And apparently this Bernard Saul totaled up almost $2 million in profits over the course of 5 years, used it to live the good life, new truck, boat and trailer, RV. He was just having a really, really good old time. Where was the federal government when this fraud was going on? Nowhere to be found. It took a state inspector. And that's another reason why authority ought to be returned to the states to look after the state population. See, when they're in Washington, D.C., they don't care what happens in Hawaii. They don't know anybody there. They're not eating the food. But when you have state and local inspectors who live right where they're working, they're inspecting the food they're going to eat. They're inspecting the food that their families are going to eat. They're going to want to do a much, much better job than somebody from 3,000 to 5,000 miles away. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Jim in Arkansas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I enjoy your show so much, and I welcome you back onto RBN. I listened to you way back when you were a young man. But anyway, I got some information.
That had to be a long time ago.
It's not from my brain. It's from Robert Revolt out of Missouri. He has a late-night show on RBN, and he, I know you were in and out about this shooting thing, but I think he's got some real dots connected here. First of all, the nightclub is called Pulp.
Yes.
Well, isn't it strange that there's a new march on Washington? It's already, the permits have been bought to march on the mall with homosexuals on July 17th, and the name of it is Pulp. The other thing I wanted to bring up that Robert brought up was the shooting that you had brought up, that you had heard that they were blocking the door. He actually saw a video where they were blocking the door, and the guy called in on a show and gave him the information. And since then, that video has been taken down.
Yes, I noticed that.
Sort of strange. But anyway, anyway, one thing I think that's really a biggie is this shooting, I think, was really timed perfectly because tomorrow in California, they're voting for new gun control laws.
Yes.
So if we go by Tim Geithner's advice to never let a tragedy go by, I think that fits perfectly. But anyway, I'll get off. I know you're a busy fella and you got lots of, so I'll listen to your answer to this, what I said offline.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and you're absolutely right. That's one of the reasons people think this is another false flag. It's hitting all the important political agendas at the absolute perfect time, just ahead of California's vote on new gun control. It supports the gun grabber agenda. It supports the, it's going to hope, they think it's going to drag the gays back into the Democratic area. It's ISIS, get everybody motivated to war. I mean, they tried to hit all the bases with this, and that kind of made it a little obvious what was going on. All right, let's go to Keith in Montana. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to add one other thing. I noticed last night on Twitter there are all the photos that were lining up there of the Muslims donating blood towards those victims.
That's a good point to remember.
Yeah. So, again, whether you're trying to demonize a certain group or something like that, it's the same thing as the U.S. military, predominantly Christian, that's out there slaughtering others. You can't blame everyone.
Okay, well, they are trying to blame everybody. They're trying to blame the guns. They're trying to blame Muslims. They're trying to blame the homophobes. They're trying to do this and trying to do that. And
well, this is America, Mark. You have to have a constant enemy somewhere.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and Hillary, in that video of her laughing about a war with Iran, is, we're going to provoke them to attack us because an attack will unite us under the regime. And no, it won't, because we know that's what's coming. We know that's what they're going to do.
Wasn't that, I can't remember his name, that other O'Donnell, whoever it was, that was talking about sinking a ship over in Iran? Laughing about that. Well, some go up, some come down,
Well, they laugh a lot over there. I mean, they're completely disconnected from what is happening to the military people and the ordinary people. They see themselves as so far above that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're not. So, anyway, my best to you and Claire, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot, Keith. We're going to let you go. I am looking at this story. Now, remember, we had this earlier story that the shooter, the Orlando shooter's father, visited the State Department. And earlier today, the State Department came on out and said, we have no record of his ever being there. And now there's an article that we're just now putting it up that includes 4 pictures of this guy inside the U.S. State Department. The State Department lied to us all. They're trying to basically bury the fact that this guy is somebody's spook. He's connected. He's inside the U.S. government. He's in with CIA. He's in with the Department of State. The State Department just flat out lied to the American people, saying they've got no record of this guy being in there because we've got photos of him being there. Now, under the press of all the eyewitness reports of additional suspects, somebody holding the doors closed, earlier in the show, the FBI came on out and said, well, maybe there were accomplices. Now we're seeing a story that's coming out of Blacklisted News, where sources are indicating that there now may be an arrest of an accomplice in the Orlando mass shooting. Maybe they're just setting up another patsy. But once you acknowledge that there was more than one shooter, then you're acknowledging this was a conspiracy. And you have to acknowledge that Omar Mateen may not have been the leader, and therefore his motives, his dislike of gays, his religion, may be completely irrelevant to what is going on. So, I'm seeing all this stuff coming on in. Alrighty. I'll have to look at it after the show. Let's see. So we've got that. We've got pictures of the guy there. Now, here's interesting. Donald Trump has now pulled press credentials for the Washington Post. He's not happy with the way the corporate media is treating him. And he's basically told the Washington Post, you are not allowed to cover me and my campaign any longer. And, of course, the Washington Post is flipping out. They're on the warpath. How dare you? We're the voice of the establishment. And I'm sure that's Trump is saying, yeah, that's why. By the way, Donald, if you want to get me some press credentials, I'd love to show up and give you some coverage. The U.S. Bankruptcy Court has now formally approved 154 Aeropostale stores closing. We have one down here at the bottom of the hill in the Pearl Ridge Mall. And their going out of business sale has apparently been very effective. Last time we walked past it, it was just down to the walls. You know, a couple of piles of something left in the back corner. And that means, obviously, the loss of jobs, and the economy's locking up. They're trying everything they can do to make it look like the economy is working for the benefit of the incumbents this election season. And it's arguable whether they're going to be able to sustain that illusion through November. And I don't think they can. I don't think they can at all. So, now I want to go back and close the show talking about what's developing out in California, because that is something you're not going to hear on the corporate media. We have a video and a bunch of articles on the main page of WhatReallyHappened.com talking about all these people coming forward to say there was incredibly massive election fraud in California. Going into California, where Bernie Sanders was well ahead in the polls, he was out there saying that the DNC should nominate the winner of California to be their nominee. And Hillary was trailing in the polls. She is not well liked in California. And then, miracle of miracles, she pulls off this upset victory. There are at least 3 confirmed methods of fraud. The first is that the NPP voters, no political party voters, were all required to vote on provisional ballots, which were then not counted. And it's known that the MPP voters overwhelmingly favored Bernie Sanders. The second known fraud is that young and first-time voters who also heavily favored Bernie Sanders had their registrations vanish or switched to GOP without their permission. And the third and final confirmed fraud has to do with those electronic machines, which are wide open to fraud, because poll workers at the precincts were reporting their electronic voting machines had Bernie Sanders 2-1. We even had one of those people call into the show right after it was all over. And yet somehow, by the time those electronic tabulations got to the main counting center, the numbers had been reversed. Hillary was 2-1. And that's not even looking into the issue of how much of the early balloting mailed-in ballots were fraudulent using those registrations of illegal immigrants created by Governor Jerry Brown. This election is totally illegitimate. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we've spent a big part of this program talking about this terrible tragedy down in Orlando, Florida. It's looking more and more like another one of these endless government false flags to scare us into dependence on Big Daddy government. And the story is really rapidly falling apart. I mean, when it first happened, everybody was saying that this guy, no, he's not on a terror watch list. Nobody knows who we are. No criminal background. Then, of course, today they're backtracking. We had him on our radar all this time. Well, why didn't you do something about it? If he was on your radar, how is it that he passed a background check to buy guns recently? And doesn't it mean that whole background check system doesn't work? So that's the quandary the government finds itself in. If this was a false flag attack, it's time to fire the government. If this was absolutely real, as the government says it was, then it shows the government is completely incompetent. Nothing they have done over the last 20 years has worked, has it? Constitutional violations, civil forfeitures, abuse by the TSA, it does not work. This government is hopelessly incompetent. And you cannot disconnect what happened in Orlando from this open borders issue You cannot disconnect what happened in Orlando from this U.S. imperialism across the Middle East. There's a cause and effect here going on. By the way, the governor of Florida has apparently declared a statewide state of emergency as more and more they start to hem and haw about the possibility that, yes, there were additional shooters and somebody blocking the door at the club. So everybody's out there saying, well, look, we all know there are multiple participants. They're still out there around Orlando. What are you going to do about it? And the governor said, all right, state of emergency. But I'm pretty sure that whoever is actually behind this does not want those accomplices to be found, and they're probably well on their way out of the country as it is. But we already know the U.S. government is lying. We caught them dead to rights. The State Department denied the report that the shooter's father had been to the State Department, and it took only a few minutes to find 4 photos of him at the State Department. How much longer do you have to be lied to by the government and the corporate media before you will stand up and say, yes, I comprehend. I am lied to all the time by the government and the corporate media. That is how they control us, loot us, exploit us, enslave us, send our children off to be killed and crippled in wars of conquest. It's time to man up and face this government as it truly is, not as we wish it to be, not as the fairy tale we're told it is in school and on the media. We need to recognize this government for exactly what it is and what it does and how it does it. And then decide what we're going to do about it. Because it's gone on way, way too long. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, share what you know with everybody that you know. Just take all this information about a false flag and just send it across social media. Email it to everybody that you know. We're in a war for the truth, and the truth is on our side. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.